everyone, and welcome to LudoNarraCon 2020. Just gonna let's pull that game audio down a little bit. That's probably better. So hi, I'm Gareth Damian Martin, and I am the developer of In Other Waters. We came out on April the 3rd. We're here to do LudoNarraCon with our publisher Fellow Traveller. So they are LudoNarraCon is a whole thing which is happening all weekend. There's live streams for loads of different games all across Steam, and we're one of them, and I'll be in a panel on Saturday as well at I think 10 AM PST. So yeah, but today I'm going to start off with some live stream gameplay of In Other Waters, so you can all see what the game is like and talk a little bit about the game, about making the game. It's been in development for 2.5 years, so it was kickstarted back in 2018 and came out, as I said, April 3rd, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of that and also answer any questions that pop up in chat as well as I go. So for those of you who don't know the game, this is the base, which is the kind of central hub of the game. In Other Waters is a game about a xenobiologist called Ellery Vass, who is stranded on the planet Glies 667cc. And while she's stranded on that planet, she discovers a dive suit, which she finds inside is installed an AI. And in the game you play as this AI, so you run the inside of Ellery's dive suit, and you guide Ellery around the planet and help her to study it and understand it. And you also uncover the history and the mysteries that are held in the planet. But right now we're in the hub. I'm just gonna. That game audio sounds kind of loud to me in my headphones. But yeah. So this is the hub base, and this is where you go out on your dives with Ellery. It's a modular base stack, which is something that allows you to move up and down through the levels because you're an AI installed in its internal systems. So at the top we've got the comm level, habitation, and in here we have where Ellery will write journals and record her observations about the world. And this is one side of the story. By reading Ellery's personal logs, you find out more about who she is, why she's here, and specifically her history as well. This is the bay, so this is where the kind of moon pool is, where you come back into the base and you land your suit here. Sample store is here, which is samples that you found out in the world. The dive map is here. We're going to get back to that in a minute. And then we've got the lab down here. Ellery's working the lab. She's that little yellow dot that's hanging out down there. Hello everyone in chat. See people saying hello. Please feel free to type any questions in there. I can see the chat and I will answer them as I can. So she's working away in the lab there at the Taxonomy computer. And this is where we log all of the creatures that we can discover in the game. So I've played a little bit of the game. This is maybe 2 hours into the game where I've decided that we're going to start up, because I wanted to show a bit of the side content of the game, not necessarily the main story that people might have seen already. So these are Ellery's observations. This is our taxonomy system, which we'll also get back to in a minute, and sample analysis here. We've got the samples that we saw in the base. Down here is the medical level. We've got nothing's happening there right now, but it does have some important story elements. The generator, which keeps the base moving, and the observation blister all the way at the bottom. So as I said, what I want to do today is start off by, we're at this point in the game about 2 hours in, where we've uncovered a little bit of the map, but there's still tons of the map out here that we don't know about. And we've just got the first upgrade, which is a propulsion system, which allows you to pass through currents. And on this map, we can see that we've got a way station here and a way station here, one in the central area and one in the east area. And those are where you drop into the game and allow you to explore. and this is our priority target right now. Ellery has left this notification for us to tell us that with the propulsion system hooked up to the suit, we should be able to cross this rift and head into the bloom. But we're not going to do that right now. What I'd like to do is just go and find a few samples and show you how you study creatures in other waters, because one of the things that's quite unique about In Other Waters, apart from being a narrative game like maybe Firewatch or something similar to that, it's also a game where you get to play as a biologist, and you get to study and assist the biologist, and you get to study creatures, which I think is, while there's lots of scanning systems in games, it's quite rare that you have maybe this level of detail. So all of these little pulsing dots everywhere are the sample requests that Ellery has left us. So while Ellery's working away in the lab, she's leaving us these sample requests to tell us this is where you might find things that are useful, that I need to analyze in order to study life. And they all relate to the taxonomy. So these are the different categories: animals, fungi, plants, bacteria, and so they all get logged in here. So I'd like to learn more about this particular creature this time. So this is the spore catcher, which we've seen swimming around. And the description says here that spore catchers are small, soft-bodied creatures which move quickly through the water by using siphon jets. Their mantles, striped with bright colours that shift as they swim, allow the creatures to modify their movement through the water with precise flapping motions. Watching them navigate the water is hypnotic, their rapid turns and loops showing incredible agility, flitting through the water like a bat or bird. Spore catchers use this wide range of movement to pursue the various fungal spores that are produced by the reef stalks. The spore catchers seem to be highly selective about which spores they consume, suggesting that analysis of the stalk spores might tell us more about the spore catcher's behaviour and diet. So if we look in the behaviour section, we see that Ellery says, okay, we need a food sample, so we need stalk spores. This is what we read from here. Ellery is just heading through into another part of the lab. You can kind of watch her idle and wander around. I think it's a really fun part of the game that I really want to get in, this feeling that you're kind of observing her, that you're a computer in the system. So we're looking for stalk spores. So here's a sample request for reef stalk spore. So we're going to head to the central reef, and then we're going to head south and see if we can find some stalk spores. So let's go. Okay. So, the way in which In Other Waters plays when you're outside of the base is all through this interface here. This is something that you're taught at the start of the game, that you learn as an AI how to use. But at this point in the game, you should be pretty familiar with it, so I'm not going to go through it in great detail. But the main thing you'll be doing is scanning. You can see these orange points of interest and these little creatures, static creatures by this icon, and up here we've got a node that we haven't scanned. So we scan a node and Ellery will write out the observation. So Ellery's inside this dive suit and we're running the systems of it. And so when we click on things, Ellery writes a description of what she sees there, an observation. So here she says, the pale sand is unmoving here, but to the north I can see the yawning chasm and strong currents of a wide rift. So we're not going to go up there right now because that way is going to take us up to this northern rift here and cross into the bloom, but I want to do a bit more studying before I head into there. This is a point of the game where the game kind of opens out and you can choose a bit more where you want to go. You can follow the story or you can wander around. Okay, so down here, you see it says Forest Edge, the last line of thick stalks before the sandy plains of the central reef. But right now that vector is blocked. It's got stalks over it. And I don't have any sink stalks right now. Shore sacks. So one of the things in the game is use samples to interact with different life in the game. So I'm going to go collect some samples so that I can get us through that block. So I've got a question in chat. it's just a comment from Sanagi, who says, I will say that the detached, AI-centric, utilitarian view of the world is rather intriguing. It leaves you plenty of room to just paint your own mental image of what's going on, what's around you, such as how the lab looks or the area around this way station. So yeah, that's absolutely part of what I wanted the game to be, really, is to leave a lot of space for the player's imagination to interpret the world through the signals and systems that they're receiving. And so, you know, all you see is this kind of radar view of the world, and you get text descriptions, and that allows you to build up your own mental picture of the world rather than having to rely on someone else's. Okay, so I just picked up, yeah, what I just did there was some sampling. So I used this little panel over here to grab a little sample that I know I'm going to need down here to get through. So at this point in the game, you've already kind of been through that sequence and understood that that's how it works. You rotate this, and then you use these little tabs here to close the clamps, and that will get you through. So then samples, we see we've got a Shrosack here, which is a spherical gas-filled membrane produced by the stalks. And these are a kind of signaling system that's used by the stalks to send signals between them. All of these stalks are kind of fungal creatures that are growing on the reef in these interconnected colonies, and they communicate through spores and through sound. So we're going to make a sound, and those stalks are going to get out of our way. They're all retracting into the sand. So we're heading south to try and get this sample. And we can see there's some creatures around here. This one I haven't scanned before. It's a shelled creature. There seems to be some tolerance for the creature scraping by the stalks. They only warn the creature when it cuts too deeply. So each of these creatures, you'll see, the more you scan them, the more information you get about them. Just bring one up here. There's a little, so I've got a little bit of data left to gather on these guys. Oh, that might be it. Yeah. Okay, so I've completed the data for that creature by scanning enough of them, because I scanned some earlier. And Ellery is now naming these creatures, because we've got enough data on them. She said, I'm naming these stalk scrapers for obvious reasons. That's because these are creatures which swim around, scraping on the stalks here. And it says here in the description, now that I've got full data, each creature just displays a description when I click on it. And it says, a large creature with a translucent shell and jointed legs for swimming and feeding grazes on the membranes of reef stalks. So all of these creatures are operating on their own schedules, and you can hear them kind of calling to each other and interacting. And we can also mess with them a little bit. In fact, we've got some Shrosack, so we need to get some. But I can scare them away, and there are these larger stalks here, sing stalks. It says here, large stalks which sway, producing a distinctive hum or groan, part of the network of stalks which is found across the reef. So if you can hear that groaning sound, I might have turned it down a bit too much, but that's produced by these huge tree-like fungi which sway back and forth in the water, releasing spores. Then you have the lower beds of stalks, and you have these little guys who are scraping the stalks and trying to eat them, and then you have the signal stalks here who are producing the bubbles to try and protect the stalks from the scrapers. But we're looking for stalk spores. I see a node over here. It says spore clusters. Spores from the stalk seem to be massing here in large clumps. This might be a good place to sample them. Okay, so we're going to head over here. And so this is the sampling system I used earlier. You can see that we've got a sample there. We rotate this little dial, close two clamps, and vacuum the sample up. And this, like a lot of the designs in the game, is based on the ways in which samples are kind of taken by deep sea researchers. Usually it's this quite laborious process of lining up a reticule and then having to clamp the object and try and catch it. And you know, there's a lot of skill in catching a squid in a little vacuum sealed tube. 1,000 meters under the ocean while you're piloting a robot remotely by a wired connection. And I didn't, the game doesn't need to be that extreme, but I wanted to replicate that same kind of meticulous and kind of methodical feeling of taking samples. So we're going to take some of these stalk spores here. A stalk spore containing a complex cocktail of minerals and compounds. Right, so we can take that back to the base now, and that's going to tell us something about the creatures. We've also got some other little creatures that are pinging around at speed, which are the spore catchers, which are the ones that we are trying to observe with the stalk spores. So we're trying to find out more about them by analysing their food. And we can find out that this is their food as well by putting it in the world and seeing that they'll react to it and they will come and eat it, and then they're off again. They're never really very still. Okay, I think there's also one more sample I want to get out here, which is the stalk bark, to try and study these stalk scrapers. So I'm going to keep heading south. I'm just going to grab some more of these short sacks so I don't get stuck. So these nodes are all already marked because I've already been down here. I want to head over to the stalk that I visited before that I didn't get enough samples from. I'm going to grab a sample here. Okay, that should be enough. And now, because I have that waypoint unlocked, I can just hit on my drone retrieval button here, and I can contact a drone to come pick me up and bring me back to the base. So now we've got these samples in the UI, in the base here. I'm going to transfer a couple across. I'm going to go down to sample analysis, and then, so I want to analyze the stalk spores. And I want to analyze the stalk bark as well, which we got from that calcified stalk. Okay, put that back. And then if we go and look in the taxonomy, in the fungi, we're looking at the fungal stalks. Then we can see that we've unlocked more information about those stalks. And we've also unlocked more about the creatures that we wanted to study, which is the spore catcher, so the behavior. Analysis of the unique chemical compounds found in stalk spores and a wider understanding of how stalks use spores to communicate suggests a more mutual relationship between spore catchers and stalks than initially assumed. If stalks are able to tailor the chemical makeup of their spores, it is possible that the select spores the catchers eat are intended for their consumption and contain compounds and minerals attractive to the species. As spore catchers use their colour-shifting properties to hide among stalk colonies, it seems increasingly possible that stalk colonies and spore catchers are mutualistically linked, that catchers serve the needs of specific stalk catchers. What those needs are, however, is not yet clear. Analysis of a spore catcher egg, if found, may help us gain a full picture of their physiology. Okay, so now we know that these spore catchers, these little creatures that hide in the stalks and swim around them and eat the spores, we know that those spores seem to be tailored specifically to each catcher by the stalks. And we've just found out that the stalks themselves, the stalk spores themselves have a rich cocktail of compounds unique to each spore, some of which are previously unknown to human chemistry. This aspect of the spores and their noticeable exchange between colonies of stalks suggests that these chemical cocktails are part of an information exchange network. However, some of these spores also appear to be true spores, used for the asexual reproduction of stalk colonies, suggesting that the information-carrying spores are adapted or modified reproductive spores. Analysis also suggests that stalk colonies may possess a high level of intelligence and cognition, and that the messaging provided by the spores is nuanced and even subjectively unique to each colony. Patterns across multiple spores from a single colony even suggest a chemical signature possessed by each stalk group. Could these be thought of as stalk names? So the stalk spores have also helped us understand more about the spores and the spore catchers themselves. And we understand now that the reef stalks, even though they're just fungal colonies, are actually quite complex, and they have complex exchanges of information that somehow the spore catchers are involved in. But the next thing to find out more about the spore catchers is to go and find one of their eggs. So I'm going to look on the dive map, and so we can find out more about the stalk scrapers here by finding a shell. Ellery says that she saw stalk scrapers here when we crossed the forest. We should search this area for fragments of their shells. So that was the area we just crossed there. We saw all those stalk scrapers. Then out here in the stalk forest, it says spore catcher movements suggest they nest in the safety of the western stalk forest. Let's investigate. So Ellery's decided while she's working away in the lab that there are the potential for spore catcher eggs out in this forest. So that's where we're going to head next, so we can find out more about these spore catchers. Where is Ellery? So Ellery right now is in the upper observation blister here as well. But she'll go to her terminal, she'll walk around the common area of habitation, she will work in the laboratory. Later on in the game she'll also visit medical, so the story is also told through Ellery's movements there too. Okay, so we're going to head out into the central reef, and we're going to go find those spore catcher eggs. So if we go to the east, so we've already been out here once already, that's why we don't need to scan these. We went out here earlier to collect some of the items that we needed to build the propulsion unit, which is this little propulsion unit up here, which we're going to use in a little bit in the East Reef, I think. Okay, so let's head over here. I'm going to grab some of these straw sacks to help me get through the forest. So this western stalk forest is a little different to the area we were exploring before. You'll see that it has all of these ordered rows of stalks. It's not like the chaotic structures of the southern forest. In fact, it's kind of strangely terraced. And here there's these strange bloated stalks, which says when alarmed, these stalks burst open, releasing their toxic contents into the local water. Could they be defending themselves? So part of the storytelling within Other Waters happens through the world, while the kind of core story of In Other Waters involves the search for Minai Nomura, a friend of Ellery's from her past, and also uncovering the history and the secrets of the planet. There's also a lot of information that players can dig into if they want. Mysteries like why is it that the western stalk forest is ordered and terraced, unlike the chaos of the southern stalk forest, or they can dig into the mystery of why these bloated stalks exist, and if we just pop one, what these microbes that are now in the water, what those microbes are and where they come from, and then we can sample those. And by studying these, we can find out more about the history of the planet. But it's totally up to the player what they're really interested in investigating. You can also hear there's a fizzing sound right now because my rebreather can't work because I'm in this toxic area. So I'm going to move out of there before my oxygen depletes. But anyway, we are on the hunt for a spore catcher egg. So I'm going to have a hunt up here, try and clear myself a path through. The other use for samples in other waters, especially rare samples, is that they can be used to refuel your power or your oxygen. So we lost some oxygen there, but nothing that we need to worry about right now. And we're also using up a lot of power. You can see that this toxic microbial colony that we found inside the stalks has a 30% power rating, so that's going to restore a third of our power. Well, this little stalk spore here has 5%. So the rarer a sample is, the more likely it's going to benefit you in some way to get through. But we are blocked off in 2 directions here. So I'm going to head back. I didn't get enough shrill sacks, so we're going to have to go back and get some. So this area is also a little tenser than the other area. You have to kind of navigate this maze, and it can be a little confusing. You have to make the most of the shrill sacks you've got, otherwise you can get trapped. We are still within range of the way station. It's just up here, so we can always hop out to the base if we need to. But if we want to find the secret samples that are hiding out here, we're going to need to be a bit more careful. See a few more people are turning up in chat, and just to let you know that if you do have any questions, please do post them in chat. I'm happy to answer questions from players who played and completed the game and have some lore things they want to ask, or if you're a new player and you just want to find out what this game is about, please feel free to ask questions. Okay, so there's another bloated growth over here, and Ellery says, some vein or root must run through the spot as the sand rumbles with unseen movements. Are all the bloats connected? So a lot of the information which Ellery provides is not necessarily conclusive information about, she's not able to just look at an object or a creature and say, I know exactly what that is, that's one of these. A big part of this game for me was about creating a game with a sense of discovery. Often we have exploration or discovery in games, but that doesn't actually mean discovering things for the first time. For example, like in Subnautica, where all the creatures already have names, there's already coral, like earth coral on the planet, or in Metro Prime, where you can go around scanning things, but where's the information that's in the scan visor coming from? We're not discovering it for ourselves, we're kind of accessing some intergalactic Wikipedia. For In Other Words, I wanted something that felt a lot more like real discovery, so that's why Ellery has to name things for the first time. She has to learn to understand them, and that's why often she's asking questions rather than giving answers, although it's a combination of the two. Okay, I'm just trying to be careful around here so that I don't set off any of these samples and open up some toxic water for myself. Set off any of these bloated roots, although I should really scan them. I should try and finish scanning these because I've only got a little bit of data left to gather on these bloated roots. So it says, and it says here, the pulsing, pumping rhythm of these stalks' contractions suggests that some process is happening inside them. Okay, and so we're heading up north here. North of here, an angular ridge ascends, cutting the shelf in two. The only way further north is to cross the rift to the east of here. So right now we've headed up into the northern part of this stalk forest. You will have remembered on the map that there was a big rift cutting in, and we can see the end of it here. And through that rift, that's the bloom, where we're going to head after we've finished doing our studies here. It says here, tucked into the side of this corroded rock, a pile of stones with worn holes sit in the sand. Within a hole, something glitters. And you'll see here it's marked with a sample candidate, so that means that we can sample it. And this little dot in the middle is also an icon. Oh. And that looked like a spore catcher. The easiest way to check would be to drop a little bit of their food. Oh, there they come. Yeah, and we can confirm that that's a spore catcher, so that means these samples, which again, like I was saying, it's about a sense of discovery. So the first time you find a sample, we don't know what it is until we take it, and then Ellery will stick a little label on it. So it's a striped egg, an egg sampled from a spore-lined nest. So now we can kind of figure out that, okay, there was a spore catcher there, we've identified them, we found an egg, so that looks like the spore catcher's egg that we were looking for. And some glittering stalks here, but as you can see, we are still within range of the drone. So I'm just going to ping us back to base and we can go scan that egg. Okay, let's press these eggs, and we can see that these are eggs which can only be sampled from those nests or that nest. Have a really nice high power and oxygen rating as well, so I'm gonna keep one of those here because that's going to be useful. I'm going to keep that, so yeah, I put one in the base here. Go down to the lab. What's Ellery up to? Ellery's maybe eating, she's at the table there. Nope, so we want to head to something else. So we're going to put the egg into the lab analysis. That's updated the entry here, so that means Ellery has updated our logs. You can see here that we've now unlocked the theories section. So Ellery's written some theories about the spore catcher based on the egg we just analysed. She says, analysis of the spore catcher egg shows a strong correlation between the minerals it contains and the minerals present within the catcher's favoured spores. It seems that through the spores, stalks are able to affect the catcher's egg production, therefore controlling the volume, traits and behaviour of catchers within any area of the reef. In a sense, the stalks have domesticated the catchers, leaving the two intrinsically linked as species. But the question of what the catchers provide the stalks remains. Do catchers serve a specific purpose, consuming unwanted or incorrectly configured spores, for example? Or are they kept for other reasons? Could the catchers be kept by the stalks for their companionship and social use, just as humans keep pets? So now we know, lots of things about the spore catchers. We know that we have these observations about how they look, and about their behavior, what they eat, and now we've started to understand how they fit into the ecosystem. And this is also a really important part of what I wanted to do with this game, is explore the idea of symbiosis and the idea of interconnected ecosystems. Not just this simple idea of predator and prey, but that each creature has its own place in the ecosystem. And now we've also unlocked a sketch. So Ellery will do these sketches for you when you have completed the sections of the study. When she's got enough data, she'll do a little sketch for you which will tell you a little more about the creature and give you the kind of lone chance to look at it and to understand a bit more of it and maybe think about how you imagined it based on what you've been seeing. I kind of, in a way, these are a bit like the drawings or paintings you used to get of enemies in kind of game manuals, where they used to help you kind of imagine more about the game world. I wanted to create something that made people feel like they had this small insight, this small window into the game world, but they didn't necessarily see everything. Anyway, let's get back to what we were doing. So I'm going to equip myself to head out to the East Reef now, and explore an area that I couldn't explore before because I didn't have the propulsion system. So what I'm going to take is spark colony for fuel. I'm going to take this for oxygen and fuel and a few shrill sucks. Okay. So, time to head out to the East Reef, because there is a current here which cuts me off, and up until I got the propulsion system, I couldn't actually get there. So now I can get there. Even though it's not where I'm supposed to go, it's where I want to go. So I'm going to do that. So, I'm going to So we're heading out into the East Reef here. Now the East Reef is a bit of a different area. It is a kind of totally a totally protected area, while the area close to the blue struggles a bit more for reasons that I won't get into right now. The East Reef is an area which is on the far east side of this, so far away from any danger, and because of this it means that lots of softer plant species can grow here, and the stalks kind of allow them to grow within their colonies. So we have these shimmer blooms, which are wide single petal plants that come in a variety of hues. They appear to be primarily photosynthetic and produce a heavy furry looking pollen. We also have stalk colonies, and then we have these interesting table stalks, which are towering canopies of stalks entwined around rib growths, and they pulse as their pores systematically open and close. And one of the mysteries you can investigate is exactly what are those ribbed growths that table stalks hold on to, and why do they protect them so carefully, but we're not going to investigate that right now. Instead we're going to head out east here and go out into the open ocean and see what we can find out there. So this says, as the shattered edge of the reef curves away to the east, the currents fade and the static water grows warmer. Tall canopy. From the cover of this canopy I can see a series of tall pillars out to the east, each one topped the garden of unknown life. I'm sorry, people in chat. I can see people in chat saying that the stream is not loading for them. I'm sorry. You can watch it on the loop. It will definitely be fixed later. So yeah, I'm sorry that you can't hear me. But I see somebody called Norabot saying that they wanted to come by and give their love to the devs. The game has been such a surprise for this year. Big fan. Thank you very much, Norabot. It's been a lovely launch that we've had. Really, it's been incredible to see people come out and support the game and really get behind what I've been trying to do. I'm pretty much a solo dev on this project, apart from the composer and a little bit of programming help, and so seeing people kind of enjoy this world that I've been sweating over for 3 years has been a really nice experience, and there's a nice little community forming around the game. So if you ever, if you do get stuck in the game, get to the Steam forums and chat to people there. I'm just going to tell people in chat that I'm recording and that I will keep going. Okay, cool. Anyway, let's get back to this. So this says, a strong current cuts across the east edge of the shelf, with the turquoise haze of the open ocean stretching beyond. And we can see that this is blocked, but we have a propulsion system here that we built using a little microbe that we found inside those bloated stalks. That's the first upgrade you get in the game, so I'm going to prime it with oxygen. You see I lost a little bit of oxygen there, priming it. And then I will activate it. And then let's try that one again. Okay. Not really sure what happened there. Current's edge. East of here, the current fades and strange pillars rise up from the dark of the ocean floor. This large pillar extends down into the murk of the deep water below, standing improbably straight and tall, a geological anomaly. Okay, so we can turn off our propulsion system now. And where are we? Pillar Garden. This pillar is topped with a layer of bright and sunlit life. Looking around, each of these pillars has the same green-gold peak. shimmering petals. In the sunlight, these spade-like petals open themselves wide to the light, welcoming gratefully. So we can see now that we're in an area called the Pillar Gardens, which are these strange pillars which poke up out of the ocean floor from deep. This is all deep water around, so that's the deep ocean down there. And they have these green gold gardens of life on top of them. And it's a very peaceful part of the game. It's a kind of protected area that this current doesn't reach. Creature tracks. Patterns of dents in the sand show the paths of feathery creatures that cross from pillar to pillar in slow and purposeful loops. Okay. So here we are. And we can see these little creatures wandering around. I'm going to scan one of these guys. Feathery creature, a cleverly camouflaged creature mainly composed of feathery frond-like arms which it waves rhythmically as it moves. And Ellery says, these funny feathery creatures are all around these gardens. Let's start logging their movements. So we've got these creatures. And we've got these green webs as well. Between the pillars, bright green webs of twisted tendrils extend, forming thin pathways from garden to garden. These long, pale green strands of plant matter entwine in flat blades, which trail horizontally between the pillars. It says, these twisted strands are like webs between the pillars. Let's start logging notes on them. It appears that a number of the creature's feathery arms have sharp edges that it uses to prune the pillar garden's flora. Okay, so we're starting to see an ecosystem here. There are these strange plant tendrils that are connecting the pillars, and then we see that there are these feathery creatures which they seem to be using these tendrils as little bridges in order to cross the deep water. So I'm going to scan a few more of these. It says these entwined tendrils are flat like blades of kelp and hold themselves taut between the pillar tops. So I can sample one of these guys here. These will be useful for trying to understand what these plants are. Silken strands, pale green strands of plant tendrils from the pillar gardens. Okay, oh, I'm going to top up my oxygen. I've got something that can... Yep. Let's put these soothe spores in there. I don't need those right now. Okay, so here's another pillar. It says it's caked in golden pollen. That means that we can grab some of that pollen for ourselves as well. And let's head south here. So, as you explore each area in the game, you start to slowly build a picture of each ecosystem, you know. Through these descriptions and through what you can see here, you start to kind of build up this knowledge, and I think this is a really important process in the game that I really wanted the player to have this experience of kind of slowly piecing together all of the little bits of the ecosystem. And then if you're really curious, you can come back like I have and find out more about the areas or spend more time here experimenting with samples, seeing how things interact. And I think it's an experience I really wanted to offer the player, this opportunity to be able to dig deep into an ecosystem, but also to be able to kind of feel like a scientist, feel like someone who's piecing things together. And head down to this hold pillar. Oh, and there's a creature, but it was way too fast for me to catch. And I've got too many samples, so I'm going to sacrifice this egg for the moment. But what did it leave behind, that creature? A chitin plate, a shard of chitin plate left behind by a segmented worm, so that's what Ellery saw. And dump some of this pollen back into the world. So we don't need it. I'm going to try and chase that creature and see if it... There it is. When disturbed, this segmented creature shot out of its burrow, ejecting grit and sediment as it swam away. These creatures are tricky to catch a glimpse of. Let's see if we can scare up a few more. So if we head over to it. Oh, yep, off it goes. Okay, so we know that these creatures are hiding in burrows inside these pillars. So again, we're starting to get more pieces of the puzzle here. And you can see that we get slowed down when we try and pass through these tendrils as well. So it's another one of these feathery creatures. These two tendril bridges almost meet before disappearing into holes in the pillar. Are they rooted to the rock inside? Oh, there's another one. Okay, let's see if he should have settled somewhere over here. Oh, there he is. These creatures scrape away at the pillar's surface, carving their burrows into the rock. It is impressive given the density of the pillars. Managed to scan another one of those. Silken plant. These trailing plants can be of great length and appear only to grow from the sides of the pillars. How did they form? So the stream is all back as well, which is good. So just going to let people know. Cool. So yeah, if you are on stream, do let me know questions. I'm sorry if you're watching this on the loop. But if you do want to ask me questions, you can always find us on Twitter at In Other Waters, or me specifically at Jump Over the Age, and I'm happy to answer questions there if you have them on the game. Just scan a few more of these silken plants. Need to gather a bit more data on these. Now I'm going to head down to this thin pillar that rises up from the murk like a pencil, its sides marked by the faint strata of geological eons. So this is one of the more peaceful areas in the game, really. This is a kind of little island of calm for people to explore. And part of this section of the game was written by another writer called Danny Wadeson, who was one of the guest writers on the game. So I had a few guest writers who are friends of mine or people that I wanted to contribute, and Danny was one of those. Danny also is the writer, or one of the writers on Backbone, which is, I believe, in LudoNarraCon as well. And you guys probably know that game. I'm going to scan some of these silken plants. So I've noticed these strands don't connect directly to the pillars, but disappear into holes in their sides. What are they connected to then? Long strands of pale green and white plant matter that twist into broad, flat bridges and web between pillars. I've named this sea silk, although I'm not sure what kind of plant it is. Check my notes back at base. Okay, so we have named this plant that stretches between pillars sea silk. And the thing about it is it seems to stretch out of the burrows of those burrowing worms we found earlier. So kind of starting to see maybe there's some connection there. We're scanning some of these feathery creatures. And it seems that if they're knocked off a surface, these creatures can swim, but inefficiently must be an emergency measure. So these are not really swimming creatures. And that's why they're relying on these bridges to carry themselves between these gardens. It's apparent that matter from the blooms, such as pollen, collects in this creature's feathery arms. Is this intentional? Okay, so we're starting to see a connection between these creatures which are carrying pollen from garden to garden and using these little bridges between them. Oh, another one of them. I just caught it. I've observed these creatures have a bright tail lore made from many thin pointed plates. What is its purpose, I wonder? Pillar garden here. This pillar top is a little sparser than some of the others. Perhaps some of the more southern pillars have only been recently seeded. Okay. Although I don't know if I really need any more bright pollen right now. Do with some power boosts. Okay, just going to head all the way down to the south. See what I can find down here. Despite sitting all the way out here, this pillar is hooked up to the others by a long tendril. Oh, so we've scanned enough of these creatures to call them gardeners. A feathery, slow-moving creature that prunes the plants of the pillar gardens, moving between pillars along their silken bridges. Okay. Great. So we've discovered those guys, and we can analyze some things about them. So I think now, see what sample I can find down here. One more pollen. Oh, what's this here? An exposed tendril. A tendril loosely dangles from the pillar, its root pulled out from the rock. So we've got the root of one of these sea silk plants here, which I'm going to grab as well. Okay, and then I think that's good for now. I'm going to head back to base and analyze some of that inventory I've got there. Oh, just give me 1 second. I just need to quickly fix something. Okay, sorry about that. I just realized that my recording was going to fail because of a lack of disk space. But that's fixed now. Okay, so we're going to chuck some of those samples. We got in here. Let's just chuck everything across. Those ones are going in there. One's going there. Okay, and then we can go. We can analyze the strands of the sea silk, and also this root we got from the sea silk too. And that means that now in the plant section, tendril leaves, sea silk, we now have lots of information about sea silk. In fact, we have worked our way all the way through. Oh, there's a question that I saw pop up on chat. I might have missed it earlier. It says, a bit of a tangential question. You mentioned listening to the 77 Galapagos expeditions when designing this. Where did you source those? I'd love to hear them. So you can, if you dig around, there's a good question. I think Woods Hole Oceanographic has those recordings. So if you search for Woods Hole Galapagos expeditions, then you can probably find the audio recordings because they were done by Woods Hole. So what we're talking about there is that there's a lot of In Other Waters was inspired by real oceanic exploration, and in particular one famous expedition, which was the 1977 Galapagos Vents expedition, where a group of geologists who theorized about the idea of deep sea hydrothermal vents went to explore those vents, and the really kind of fascinating thing that happened is that these geologists discovered life at hydrothermal vents, which was not something that anybody expected or theorized. It's kind of the closest we've ever come to discovering alien life in the history of our species, that we headed to this supposedly barren part of the world, this impossibly toxic, impossibly hot section of the seafloor, and there we found huge amounts of life. And it's a really exciting thing to look into. I'd really recommend reading about it. It's something that people should know more about in a way, because it's this incredible moment in the history of biology where a group of geologists as well found life, so they really didn't know necessarily how to classify or how to talk about it, and it's kind of one of the big moments in biological history of the 21st century really. Anyway, now back to In Other Waters. So let's read a little bit about the sea silk. So we already know about it from observing it. This bright green plant stretches its silken tendrils in long horizontal swaths between pillars in the east reef. It's characterized by fibrous, fine and flexible strands that can be as thick as rope and as thin as human hair. Looking at its behavior, we find that it's actually made from two different plants that have somehow conjoined where they met. Also, there are younger growths formed near to the end of each plant's strand, demonstrating their ability to form new shoots along their length, which must be why I've observed a web-like pattern in some of the tangles. And then when analysing the root, the roots, Ellery discovered that sea silk does not end in roots. They're not actually roots, what we sampled. They were a kind of silken ball that she initially took to be a root. However, in the lab analysis, it was revealed to be an entirely separate creature. The sea silk is a product or plant-like limb of this organism. I've discovered that the root itself is able to put down but also retract strands of sea silk from within. It's an unusual fusion of creatures. Is this a symbiotic relationship or a parasitic one? Regardless, these curious creatures and their growths are the bridge builders of the pillar ecosystem, turning isolated gardens into a connected network and helping them flourish. So we can see a sketch here of this root-like network with these strands of plants coming out. And here's a study of the sea silk fibers that Ellery's done. I mean, personally, the part of the joy of making this game was also exploring this kind of aesthetic of biological studies. I really enjoyed doing these sketches for Ellery and trying to think about how she would have depicted the things that she found when she explored the planet. But I think that's probably enough on the xenobiology side for now. I think we can now kind of push on with the story, and I can show you a little bit of a new area and a kind of key moment that happens in the story now. So we've just got this propulsion system, and at the moment we're on the trail of, as I've said before, Minai Nomura, so another biologist that Ellery came to this planet to see. She was called here, but she doesn't necessarily know why Minai called her here. And when she arrived, she discovered all this extraterrestrial life, which is the first extraterrestrial life anyone has discovered. So there's a lot of mysteries, and Ellery's a little lost here, and she needs you to help her. So we're going to head into the bloom, and when we go there, we're going to take samples that are going to give us some oxygen. So we don't need that root anymore, because we've analysed it, so we can happily use it. Just checking each of these to see what the oxygen rating is like, see which ones are going to help us survive. Oh, it looks like we should also take this pollen. Great. And so now we're going to head to the central reef. As you can see, there's loads of other creatures and samples that we could explore right now, but I would like to use the propulsion system to cross the rift and head into the bloom. So this node we scanned earlier. We scanned here. The central reef way station lies within a bubble of calm, but just to its north, a massive rift brings strong currents through the reef. Rift passage. The passage between these rocks leads out into the howling currents of the northern rift. Okay, so this is the way we want to go. The northern rift is the largest of the cuts into the central reef. Crossing it without some way of navigating its currents would be suicide. Okay, so we can see a current. Now Ellery says, impressive, this split in the shelf is incredibly wide and deep. Okay, well here goes nothing. Start up the propulsion system and let's cross. Okay, so we used this earlier. I'm going to start it up. It's fed a little bit of oxygen into it. Strong currents, flecks of spores and other organic material whip past in the current, dragged into the dense stalk patches in the west. Okay. We can get across here now that we've got this. This massive split in the ocean seems almost too violent to be natural. Okay. Sheltering pillar. This pillar rising up from the ocean floor below provides shelter from the rift. Okay. So now we've crossed. There's something on the other side, a huge green cloud rising up from the shelf. That must be the bloom. So Ellery's seen a huge green cloud just up here. Less dramatically shattered than the central reef, the northern shelf slopes down gently through layers of sediment. So we've managed to cross across this rift out of these kind of fingers of the reef that you've seen on the map that extend out down to the east and the protected area. So at one side you have that protected area of the Pillar Gardens. That's way out in the east, and now we're heading way out to the west of the map. Bloom edge. The green wall of a vast bloom of some kind rises up ahead, swirling and obscure. What ecological crisis spawned this green mass? How is it connected to the reef? If the answers are anywhere, they are inside. So Ellery's saying the water inside is totally anoxic. The suit's rebreather can't function. We'll have to run on reserve oxygen while we were inside this place. Okay, so you can see that everything's changed now. We headed into this green cloud, and straight away our oxygen here is running down fast. Bulbous and shiny, these formations sit under a coating of green filaments and growths. Okay, let's head over there. Filtering fan. The water here is both highly oxygenated and temporarily filtered of its toxic microbes by the fan. Okay, I think we want to head there. There's life still hanging on inside this toxic bloom, creating safe zones in order to thrive. Perhaps these creatures can help us learn how to exist in these toxic conditions. Let's take some samples and see what effects they have on the bloom when we deploy them. Okay, so yeah, we see we've lost like almost half of our oxygen just heading in here, but these creatures here, pale fans. These pale, delicate fans are almost bone white against the clouded green of the bloom. Ellery says, these fans seem to be re-oxygenating the water. I'll start logging notes, they should be useful. So we can see that all of this toxic algae is making it difficult for us to proceed, but these little creatures are going to help us. They're making these little areas of oxygenated water, and we can take a sample from them. Let's just take a couple. And let's use some of these samples, this pollen that we took with us, to fill back up our oxygen as well a little bit. We would need a lot of those. Okay. So this is fan dust that we've sampled from these fans. A bloom oxygenating dust harvested from a filtering fan. So this is the material that they're using to create these safe zones. We can maybe move up to the next one. This fan sits among shards of rock, trembling in cyclical currents of the bloom. Let's scan this pale fan. It says, occasionally this fan shivers, releasing a flurry of green growths that have gathered among its gossamer spines. Okay, so we can get some more fan dust. So at least we've got plenty of this stuff. But the question is, what does it do? So I'm just going to try dragging it out. Okay, so we can see it creates this little temporary safe zone. It reacts with the bloom and creates this little safe zone, but that doesn't do much for us. Let's see what else we've got here. Here, the rocky shelf of the reef flakes away into large, fragile sheets with razor-sharp edges. A rise of silver silt fills the depression created by the corroded rock shelf. The tip of a shell pokes above it. Is that an eye? Okay, so we've got a creature there that's hiding in the sand. Away from the rock outcrops and fans, the visibility in the bloom falls to near zero. So we're in the middle of this algae bloom, which is very dangerous to us. And in part this is inspired by real conditions that we find in our own oceans, right? We find algae blooms, harmful algae blooms that occur where the ocean fills with algae, and while algae usually produces oxygen, when there's too much of it, it blocks out the sunlight from entering the water, and it chokes the water and starts dying and producing toxic materials. So those can be really dangerous. They can totally destroy sea life, and so we're kind of seeing perhaps something like that, but perhaps something also a bit different. So we're going to scan this little creature that's hiding in the sand here. This bronze shell sits half buried in the sand. What creature lives inside it, and how can we tempt it out? It says there's some kind of shelled creature hiding in the silt over there. We need to figure out how to tempt it out of its burrow. Perhaps a sample from elsewhere in the bloom, something that reacts with the microbial growth itself. Okay, so I think I have an idea. Oh, looks like we've woken that little creature up. Let's head over there. And so this creature is now feeding on the bloom and make egg. So I'm back. Thank you for waiting. I just wanted to get some water. There's quite a lot of reading out loud to be done right now. Anyway, so we are now in a safe spot in the bloom. I'm going to take some samples here from this nest that seems to be protecting us. These colonies do well to hold out against the bloom. The individual creatures seem to be able to digest the microbial growth. We can use this. We should try deploying a colony to see if we can create our own safe zone inside this toxic flood. Okay, so yeah, we have a bubble here created by these creatures, nest workers, tiny transparent creatures sampled from a woven nest. And maybe we can use those guys to help us explore the bloom. We've also got a sample candidate over here. These strange forms scattered around inside the bubble. Are these skeletons? They resemble radiolarians, but far bigger in scale. They are incredibly ornate. A colony of domes lying in the silver silt. What were these creatures? So we found some kind of skeletons of creatures here, but we don't really know what they were. Let's take a sample. Sphere fragment. An ornate mineral orb, honeycombed with oxygen bubbles. Oh, so, okay, that's lots of oxygen, so can feed that in there, needs must. But I really also want to investigate those, so maybe we can find more. Okay, so let's see what these nest colonies will do for us. Okay, exactly, so we've made our own little safe zone here. It's going to help us explore. Okay, so I think we need to head north and see what we can find. Rots jut out from the green at strange angles. Let's move quickly through here. A sickly pale green light filters down onto the rocks. Oh, another safe spot here and another fan. Let's scan it once we're in. Partially concealed among layers of rock, this fan slowly undulates, releasing catalytic dust in its waste. There's a faint fizzing that emerges from these fans. It appears to be caused by the coating on their spines reacting with the bloom. There we go. Okay, blue flashes flicker across the strata of rock. I should probably put some oxygen back in here. Feed some of that fan dust in. It's not very good for oxygen though. The rock outcrops of this area are clogged with strings of microbial growth which dance in the slight current. But what it is good for is waking up these little guys. So let's make ourselves a safe zone here. When active, these creatures feed directly on the microbial growth of the bloom, rapidly clearing a patch of oxygenated water. Where we stood is... A large bulbous rock emerges out of the rock floor. Silt gathers in the winding cracks that score its surface. And what's this here? Metal traces. The ghost of some equipment lies in the silt, one of the pieces lost in Minai's expeditions into the bloom. Yeah, so we're starting to be on the trail of Minai here. Looks like we're getting somewhere. Oh, some more silicate skeletons and another safe bubble with a way station in it. Let's grab one of these. Another one of these nests. It says, this nest is the way station's protector. Without its swarms of iridescent life, the station would be little more than a rust-eaten frame. Like the nests themselves, which are woven from transparent threads, the bubbles which protect them also seem to have a delicate skin. Okay, let's grab some of these nest colonies. I think we're going to need them if we want to explore further. And then let's head to this way station. It must have been a struggle to assemble the metallic cage of this way station so deep in the bloom. what led Minay out here. Finally, a way station. With this active, we can call for retrieval all across the bloom, useful for when we run low on oxygen. Open the terminal and we can resupply and see if Minay left any map data behind. So let's connect to this way station, refill my power, refill my oxygen, and download the data. Okay, Minay's got the data. Ellery's got the data. What's it say? Okay, I've got her logs here. A lot of trips back and forth between here and a laboratory. That means she must have set up a remote lab somewhere deeper in the bloom. She spent many months making trips to it, ferrying some materials from elsewhere in the bloom to there. She was studying something important to her. We have to find that lab. I'll log the coordinates on the dive map when we get back to base. Okay, let's head back to base and log those coordinates. Okay. Oh, Minnie's talking to me in the base. Hey, are you back with me? Yes. Good. I wanted to ask you about the bloom. I've been trying to understand what's causing it. It seems unlikely that we are looking at a stable ecosystem. It has to be a unique event. And yet creatures have rapidly and effectively adapted to these conditions. How is that possible? There's something we aren't seeing, something Minay was investigating too. Do you think she knows something we don't? Yes, I think she does. She has to. Maybe she's holed up in the lab mentioned in the map data, waiting for us. Let's find that lab. Okay, so let's just transfer some of these useful samples back. I'm going to put this in here. Keep hold of these, and I'm going to tell you what. So, I don't think I can analyze this usefully yet. Yeah, so it says no relevant taxonomy entries found. So we haven't scanned enough of those nests that we found in the bloom to try and actually use that data in a useful way, right? We don't have a taxonomy entry here for those creatures. They're not in here. So when we try to analyze them, that's not going to do us much good. So we're going to wait till we've scanned all of the creatures and then we can analyze these, and that will be useful to us. So, okay, we better head back out. So now we can see that this was the area before. These are the fingers of the reef that we crossed across, the East Reef, the Pillar Gardens, Central Reef. And then we're out in the bloom here where we found a way station. And Ellery's put those coordinates on the map. Data from the way station places Minay's remote lab in the southern part of the bloom. She's hiding something here. So I think the last thing we should do on this stream is head down to this lab. So this stream is running all weekend, and you're probably watching in a loop now, now that the original version is finished. After this, we're going to switch over to the radio live stream for maybe half an hour while I take a bit of a break, and you can listen to some of the great soundtrack that Amos Roddy made for this game, who's also the sound designer for the game as well, so all the sound and the music was coming from him. And then I'll be doing a little talk on the making of the game after that as well, which will dig a bit into the inspirations behind the game and some of the insights into the game as well. And those will all be running all weekend. In Other Waters is also in a couple of bundles this weekend, so if you're interested in picking up the game, you can pick it up with Heaven's Vault, which is an amazing archaeologist game where you play as a space archaeologist as opposed to a space biologist, and Still There, which is another wonderful narrative game that's about interacting with a detailed interface. So there's a space bundle that you can pick it up in, and there's also Fellow Traveller Presents bundle, which is also running all weekend with a discount. Both these bundles are 20% off. You'll be able to pick up the game along with two other fellow traveller games. So Stillness of the Wind, which is a kind of relaxed game about goat farming, but it's also a really beautiful exploration of character that we don't usually get to play in games, a kind of older person who's at the end of their life and seeing the world change. And also Neocab, which is a game I love by Chance Agency, which is a game about being a kind of Uber driver in a cyberpunk future. So you can pick up those two games if you like the sound of them with In Other Waters for a 20% discount. So both those bundles are this weekend only. So if you want to grab them this weekend. And that's it really. Like, let's get on with the story anyway. Let's head out. So based on that map, it looks like we need to first head way out to the west and then south. This side of the bubble seems so close to the way station. If it were to shrink, any foothold we have in this green desert would be lost. Okay, let's head out this way. Back out into the toxic bloom. Abandoned to the bloom by Minai, it is impossible to tell what this oxidized scrap once was. So there are these little trails of materials that Minai brought out here, and we're kind of discovering after the fact. Okay, let's keep moving through these toxic waters. Nothing of interest, just more microbial clouds. Okay, let's move quickly. Oh, we can't make ourselves a safe zone. Well, we can. There we go. We'll wake this guy up. Oh, and we have now named this creature. So we've named these creatures which hide in the bloom the bivalve bloom vein. These strange little creatures are getting a big name, bivalve bloom veins. Ellery asks, what do you think? What do we think of that name? I think maybe it's a bit long. She says, well, I like it. Okay. Want to upset Ellery, I guess. So it says, a fan-finned creature which conceals itself within a shell as a form of protection, and when awoken feeds on the bloom's toxic microbes. And it's also, we've got a nest workers bubble here as well, so we have doubly safe from the bloom. But let's move off. Oh. Let's move off down into bloom here. Rock formations in green clouds. So we're right in the heart of the storm here. Twisting in the direction of the bloom's flow, this fan cuts a clear slit of clear water through the microbial clouds. Okay, let's grab some more fan dust. Okay, how are we doing, folks? Let's keep some of these in case we find some more bloom veins. Oh, let's scan this as well. Oh, yeah. Okay, so we've logged enough data on this creature. A bloom fan. Ellery says she's naming these bloom fans. When we finally get out of this place, I'll update the base's taxonomy logs. They're pale, delicate fans that feed on the bloom by filtering it through their bodies, using a catalytic dust to counter its toxicity. Okay, so we're starting to understand more about the bloom now. You can see that, okay, we first arrived into this this area, and we had no idea how to survive, and we're losing oxygen really rapidly, but now we're starting to understand the ecosystem a bit more. Metal debris. Scattered and eaten away, debris from Minet's expedition spreads out across the rock shelf. What's this way? This part of the bloom is strangely still, the green clouds suspended in the water. Okay, let's head down here. Among the green clouds, the polychromal light of a huge bubble glows. Yeah, let's head to the bubble. This bubble has an iridescent sheen, its skin being made up of thousands of tiny particles which refract the light. So we still really don't quite understand how these bubbles work. Ellery says, up ahead, a fizzing membrane of oxygenated water. Is this what allows the species here to survive this constant toxicity? We can grab another sphere fragment here, which are super useful because they give us a lot of oxygen, with all those honeycombed oxygen bubbles inside them. Crystal cylinders. At the centre of the bubble, rounded shapes sit in a bed of silt. Around them, the water dances with streaks of refracted light. It's another one of these nests. When their protective bubbles begin to fail, these creatures burst out from their nest to repair them, swarming out to weave more threads. Bubble skin. Though physical objects seem to be able to pass, the physic skin of the bubble completely obstructs the bloom's microbial clouds. Okay, so these creatures hold out pretty well. They seem to be the creature which succeeds most effectively at keeping away the bloom. So obviously when designing the game, like one of the approaches was to really try and design ecosystems that felt natural, but also had this functional element in terms of helping the player. And you know, it's always a balance to try and make this kind of gameplay we've got here, where we're trying to find safe zones, or we're trying to explore and to have a different texture to the game, with also making them feel natural. So I hope that when people playing the game, they don't feel like this is a very contrived ecosystem, like that it doesn't make sense that these creatures would exist. I tried to make it so that it's not just you know, we're not just serving the gameplay here, the narrative and the ecosystem, they all work together. So we try to find our way through the bloom to Monet's lab. Let's try heading this way. White sand, a million tiny grains, perhaps the broken down remains of those silicate skeletons, gather here in soft sparkling waves. Toxic waters. Away from the protective bubble, the bloom regains its sickly green. Head back out. Maybe we'll make a little safe zone for ourselves here. Head into it. What does it say? Heavy concentrations of microbial life turn the water here into a flat green wall. The bloom seems endless. Luckily, there's another bloom vein here. We've already scanned those guys. So let's head into this safe zone here. So we can kind of daisy chain these safe zones together. Bloom growth. These olive green clumps of bubbles seems to gather where there is little current, and the growth of the bloom settles. These microbial growths seem big enough to log and sample. Let's see what they can tell us about this place. Okay, so we can start sampling the microbes of the blooms here, bloom here. Okay, grab one of those. But I'm going to do it very quickly, because otherwise we're going to lose a lot of oxygen. Let's just grab one. Oh, there's a few here. Oops, and quickly. Okay, now let's move off. These rocks shine with a strange smoothness. Dense bubbles. Some more of these bloom bubbles here. Scan them. These bubbles form in the densest areas of bloom growth. They might be the best clue to what the bloom is made from. Toxic waters. Soft currents push silt into corroded holes in the rock shelf. South of the bloom's ridge, the current is non-existent. Clumps of microbial growth hang in the water above a sandy plain. Okay, let's head down this way. Through the green, I can see the skeleton of Menai's remote laboratory, as fractured and remote as Menai herself. Assembled from modules extracted from the base, Menai's lab, now exposed to the corrosion of the bloom, sits silently in the silt. So here we are at the lab. This place was pressurized at some point. It must have taken months of work to establish this lab, and just weeks of corrosion for it all to fall into ruin. It looks like Menai was gathering those mineral skeletons, studying them. What secrets have you uncovered, Menai? And how were these strange silicon spheres worth all this? So Ellery is a little lost here. She's trying to understand what's happening with Menai and why she built this lab here. And we're slowly piecing together the story and the history of this planet as we work our way through the game. Some more of these guys. Might be useful. Dissected skeletons. The equipment here suggests that Menai was studying the mineral skeletons. Where she is cut through, the silica shines pure silver. No, we can't sample any here. More of these ornate silical globes sit in the silt. These bubbles must have been both their refuge and their grave. So we've named these nests now. We've scanned enough of them. And Ellery's going to call them weavers. For those beautiful nests and bubbles they weave, what would we do without them? These are nests of small, iridescent creatures which maintain protective bubbles around their territory, shielding them from the bloom. keep heading south. Beyond the bubble, the angular shape of the lab's second module sits silent, wrapped with cords of microbial growth. These modules are so rapidly melting away, are the bloom's microbes metabolizing the metal itself. Dark opening. The whole metal floor of the module reveals an opening to a passage below. Okay, so we're going to dive down into this opening here. It's a steel passage. Manai must have laid this under the lab when she constructed it. The water is clearer here, shielded from the microbial clouds. So we're in a little safe zone in this little cave here underneath the bloom. Seems to be the center of Manai's lab. Hidden workshop. Machines glint in the dark. Papers and tools lie still on silt-speckled surfaces. It is as if the scene has been frozen, captured in time. This is not just a lab. It's a workshop. She was building something down here. It's a suit. It looks like she was modifying an old atmospheric hard suit. How deep was she planning to go? These are verified for beyond 1,000 meters. I'm going to see what I can pull from the notes and documents here. Some of them are still partially readable. The lack of water flow must have kept them in good condition. She was definitely speccing this suit for use beyond the drop-off, modifying it with the silicate skeletons. Artificers, she calls them. Exoskeletons of nanofibrous geothite, protecting a silicon carbide core. The pressure resistance of their exoskeleton is unprecedented for a biological material. That would take the depth rating of this hard suit well past 3,000 meters. Incredible. But why go over the drop-off at all? What was pushing her forward? She was incredibly driven, desperate even. She mentioned sending ROVs down to the abyssal plain, cobbled together from bits of the base. All of them were lost, and her work on the suit failed, and that's where the notes seem to end. The most recent document mentions another way. Did she mention it? How? The suit was so close to completion. Why abandon it? We have to make that dive. If I can fix up this suit, we can take it over the drop-off. Perhaps Manai managed it. We need to follow. I can do this. We can do this. Let's get back outside and call in the drone. Okay, so we're following this trail a little further and finding out more about what Manai was doing here on this planet, and that's kind of the first part of the central mystery of this game. But there's also lots of other things going on, as you can tell, and I hope you're going to enjoy discovering those for yourselves. I'm not going to show you too much more because I don't want to spoil the game, but I think we're going to just head back to base now and out of the toxic bloom. See what Ellery has to say about that dive. Glad to see you're back online. Sorry for the rush, but we've got to move. I've been going through Manai's notes from her lab, and from what I can tell, she attempted a free dive over the drop-off. That's why she left her suit behind. She must have opened it up and descended. I know what you're thinking. There's no way she could free dive thousands of meters to the ocean floor, but that's what she did, willingly. And we're going after her. We need to dive now. I've been working on the suit and it's almost ready. I've used sections of Manai's failed hard suit to modify our suit. Now it's a full atmospheric dive suit. Internally, we should be able to maintain 1 atmosphere of pressure for me and that casing of yours. It'll work just like before, but our depth rating is massively increased. We can hit 2, maybe 3,000 meters. The suit is in the bay, so load whatever samples you need. I've marked the drop-off on the map, and we can dive there directly and search for any evidence. I've no idea why she would do this. It's suicide, but she seemed to believe she could do it. Get ready to go. I'll be waiting. Okay, so we've just found out that Minai tried to dive over the drop-off of the reef into the deep ocean beyond, and Ellery wants us to follow her down there. Before we do, I'm just going to take a look at her personal journals, because I see that she's written a new journal. And these are something that I think actually it's best for you to read them when you play the game, but these will tell you more about why Minai and Ellery have this relationship and what their past is together. And these are really one of my favourite parts of the game, because they're a space to kind of explore the background of the character in a way that's integrated into the rest of the game in a really natural way. But for our final act, before I end this stream and switch us over to the radio live stream, I'm going to dive to the drop-off. So the drop-off is the edge of a coral reef, or the edge of a reef where it goes down into the deep ocean. Are you back with me? We're 20 seconds from the ocean floor. Good. I was getting lonely in here. We're descending fast. The drop is huge, 1.5 kilometers down. Let's stay focused. We have no data on this zone of the ocean. The light of Gliese 667 3Cs 3 stars barely makes it this deep. I've got my headlamps on. You'll have to be my eyes. I want to work my way along the slope to the northeast. We're looking for any trace of Minai or the ROV she sent down here. Let's get to it. Okay. But I am going to leave it there, and you'll have to explore the dusk slopes and the deep sections of the ocean for yourself when you play the game. I hope you enjoyed a little bit of an insight into the game. I'm sorry for those who are on chat having some small problems there with stream. We didn't maybe get to do as many questions as I would have liked, but I think that gives you a good insight maybe into a little bit of the two parts that there are to Another Waters. The side where you get to study alien life and to dig into what you want to dig into as a player and to find out more about this world, but also to follow this story and to follow a very kind of cinematic and literary story that's going to lead you somewhere and hopefully will make you care about the characters and leave you with something when the game finishes. Like I said, the game's in 2 bundles all weekend, and they're just for this weekend, so you can get the game for 20% off along with some other games there. And I hope you decide to try it out. It's a different game, it's a bit experimental, but I'm really proud of it, and I'm really happy with the response we've got from people and the reviews we've got. I think people are really engaging with it, which is lovely to see. So I'm going to put on the radio live stream, and you can chill out and listen to some nice tunes from the soundtrack and watch some creatures, some little signals ping around while that happens. I'm going to take a little break, and I'll be back in about half an hour to do a talk on the making of the game. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you soon.